In this video, I'll show you how to use macros within Visual Studio.net. Basically, macros are just ways of automating repetitive tasks. You will go into Visual Studio.net and you'll click a record button, and then it will capture almost everything that you do within Visual Studio.net. What it does is it translates your clicks and keyboard strokes into Visual Basic.net code that references a special set of classes that represent Visual Studio. Then once you're done recording, what you can do is go into the actual code that was generated as a result of all your clicking and typing, and you're going to be able to edit that code and debug it using a special IDE called the Macros IDE. But there's a little bit of a downside to this. It's restricted to automating certain things. So you can go in, for example, as I have listed here, to the code editor, anything to do with Solution Explorer, file management. You're able to open things, close things, save things. You can automate the adding of items and how you name them. You're able to automate the finding and replacing of things within your application. And some window events, like if you were to activate a window within the main section of the IDE, or you can close windows, things of that nature. So imagine my disappointment when I heard that he had macros, and that my thought was you'd be able to pull things over from the toolbox and plop them onto the form designers, whether it's WinForms or web forms. You can't do that yet. For that type of integration, you're going to need to become part of the Visual Studio.net Integration Program Partner arrangement. There are other ways to have some tighter integration than just macros. You can use add-ins and create wizards, and we're going to show you how to do those in separate videos. So the workflow goes something like this. You'll be in Visual Studio and you'll think, hey, I need a macro to do this because I'm having to do the same thing over and over and over. So what you'll do is go to the Tools menu, then there will be a macro submenu, and you'll click Record a Macro. And you'll see a little window appear with a little tape recorder and a pause button and a stop button, and you'll be able to then pause or stop the recording of that. Whenever you record a macro using this technique, it's a temporary macro. At any given time, there's only one temporary macro that you're using. And the thought behind temporary macros is that you may need a macro to do something 10 times in a row, but you probably won't ever need it again. In that case, you could just record a temporary macro, run it 5, 10, 20 times just for the duration of your project or whatever you're trying to automate at that moment, and then you can just discard it. The next time you record a macro, it will overwrite that temporary macro. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But once you record your temporary macro, then you can go in and make changes to it using the Macros IDE. And then you'll obviously want to test and debug it, especially if it's a more complicated macro where you've added some custom code. Generally, the macros that you just record and never touch within the macro IDE, never change the code of, you probably won't need to test them. But you have this functionality if you need it. Then here comes an important thing. You need to rename the macro, because the default name is how Visual Studio designates that as a temporary macro. So if you want to save that macro, you're going to need to rename it. And then you'll also want to, in the next step, copy to the target project. Within the Macro Explorer, which is in the Visual Studio.net IDE, you'll be able to have multiple projects of macros, collections of macros. So you can have one project that's for your home development, one project that's for work, or for each of the projects that you're on at work. And you may well have a specific set of rules or macros that you want to use on those projects. So you can keep them kind of segmented in projects, and then load and unload those projects as you need them. So once you create a macro that you want to keep around, you'll want to first rename it, and then you want to copy it to your target project. Then come some fun things. What you can do is associate it with a keyboard command using the Tools Options Keyboard Properties window. And I'm also going to show you in this video how to associate it with an icon on the toolbar, and you'll even be able to create your own icon. It's pretty cool stuff. And then finally, you'll want to use it, and there's a number of different ways to activate your macro. And of course, we'll show you how to do that too. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I've done is created a very simple Windows Forms application called Macro Example. You can take a look at it. It doesn't have anything special. Haven't added any code to it, and I will not include this project within the code examples for the video. What I will do is include any code that we write for the macros themselves. So to get started, I'm going to build a simple macro that allows me to be a technical lead and to review lines of code and to say, I've checked this line of code or this function or this module and everything looks great. So what we're going to do is go to Tools, Macros, Record Temporary Macro. When I do, notice that there's this little recorder box that appears, and this is just a toolbar, just like any of the other toolbars within our IDE. We're going to go ahead and leave it floating out here for right now. It allows us to pause the recording, to stop the recording, and to cancel the recording. What's the difference between stop and cancel? Actually, it's a pretty big difference. This will stop and record all the keystrokes into and everything that we do into the macro. This one will not, and it will not overwrite any temporary macro that currently exists. So let's go ahead and create a very simple macro. What I'm going to do is select pause because I do not want the macro recorder to watch me do this, where I actually open up the form and get into the code view. It's going to assume that I've already got the code view open. And what I'm going to do is navigate to the correct spot, and then I'm going to begin recording. And I'm going to type in okay, pretty cheesy comment, but this will work for our purposes. Once I'm complete, I'm going to hit stop recording. And now let's go ahead and test it. Let's get to another line of code here. And we're going to go to Tools, Macros, Run Temporary Macro. Remember that the temporary macro is special. It has the last macro that you recorded. And if you were to record another one, it's going to write over that one. So if we wanted to save it off, we would need to take some special actions. So let's go ahead and talk about the Macro Explorer. What I'm going to do is go to Tools menu, Macros, and the Macro Explorer. Here we can see our macro projects that are loaded and available for us to use right now. By default, there is a project called My Macros. It contains a module or a file that has one subroutine in it called temporary macro. Let's go ahead and right-click temporary macro and select Edit. And when we do, notice that it brings up a new IDE called the Macros IDE, which allows us to take a look at the code that was written as a result of our recording of the macro. So we can see here within temporary macro, you'll see DTE, which is our design time environment that is available because of the namespace that's imported automatically into our My Macros project. DTE.ActiveDocument, so it assumes that we're already in the document that we're going to make a change to. .selection.text equals reviewed. Scott says OK. Very cool. So let's go ahead and close down this for right now. Or I got a better idea. Let's do this. Suppose we wanted to test our macro. What we can do is put a line break here. Then let's go ahead in here and put our cursor where we want the application to be affected. Let's go back to our My Macros dialog and select the Run button. And notice that we get a breakpoint. I'm going to step through it, hitting the Step Into button on our toolbar. I could also use F11 or F10, just like we do in VisualStudio.net. And I stepped one line of code. Now let's go back to Visual Studio and see. Notice that this line of code, see if I can do this. Yeah, great. This line of code appears now because we ran our one line of code within our macro. Now, this was a very simple example. Obviously, we can make this much more complex. We can record macros where we add items to our project, where we can activate certain windows and type in code automatically. So if we wanted to get a running start, this is a what I would term a poor man's way of setting up projects to make them the same every time. However, what we're not able to do is unfortunately drag things from the toolbox and plop them on the form designer. I want you to notice one other thing too. Let me see if I can do this real quick. See if it'll let me. Notice that I can't do anything within Visual Studio right now. There's a little box down here that rotates. It's not doing it right now for me, unfortunately, but it will show that we're currently in the middle of running a macro, and so you're not going to be able to interact with the IDE while the macro is running. And you can see it now running again. Now suppose I not only like this macro, but I also want to create my own project so that I can keep all the macros that Scott as a technical lead will use on his projects at work. So to do this, let's go ahead and stop debugging our macro. And we can do this from our Projects Explorer, but I'd rather do it from the Macro Explorer. So I'm going to go ahead and shut that down. And from the Macro Explorer, I'm going to select New Macro Project, and I'm going to call this Work Projects. I'm sorry, I can't use a space when naming my macro project, so we'll just call this Work Projects. Okay, we'll click Open. Great. So what I want to do with my temporary macro is rename it. And I'm going to call this Technical Lead OK. And then I'm going to go back into my macro editor, and I'm going to cut, just Control X, cut, and then paste this into my Work Projects Module 1. And I could change the name of this module. We'll just rename this to TL as opposed to maybe other roles that I'll play within the team and the macros that I would use associated there. So we'll save everything, close it down, and now you can see here that we have Work Projects, TL, TLOK. Now how am I going to execute my new macro? Well, what I can do is just double-click it, and it'll work. That's one excellent way of doing it. But I'd also like to map this to a keyboard command and make a new toolbar item with TLOK on it. So in order to do that, let us go to Tools, Options, and we're going to select Keyboard. And now we need to find our command. I'm going to type in macros. I could also just scroll down using the scroll area here, and then type in Work Projects TLOK. Great. And so now we need to select the basically right now there's no shortcuts currently selected or defined for this command. So I will need to press the shortcut keys. I'm going to hit Control and then the tick mark, which is right next to the 1 character on my keyboard. Now, if this had been a command that was currently used, you'd see it show up here in this box, but it's not being used by any other function within Visual Studio right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, but when I do that, whoops, well, it let me do it. Sometimes what occurs, let's go back to that screen. Actually, I think I forgot a step, so let's go ahead and do this again. Tools, Options, we're going to go to Macros, .work, project OK, very good. I'm going to hold down the Control key and select the tick next to the 1, and currently there's no shortcut selected for this command. There's no shortcut used it, so that's excellent. That's what I want to do. I'm going to click Assign, and when I do, here's the box I was expecting. It says the selected scheme is one of the default keyboard mapping schemes. It cannot be modified. So since it's the default, we're going to need to create a copy of this. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Yes, and I'm going to leave the default name. We can name whatever we want to. And so now, as long as we have the copy of default settings set as our keyboard mapping scheme, whenever we hit the control and the tick button at the same time, our macro will happen. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and I'm going to hold down the control key and hit the tick, and there we go. It worked. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is make a icon on a toolbar that allows us to fire off our little reviewed macro. So to do this, what I'm going to do is go to Tools, Customize, and what I'll do is create a new toolbar that I'm going to call Macros. And when I do that, notice that there's a little macro floating window here. That's important. I'm going to go to Commands and scroll down to Macros. And notice that the macro commands then appear, and we're going to scroll down to our work projects, Module 1, TLOK. I can even take a look at the description of this. I can look at the keyboard mapping for this. But what I'm going to do is hold my mouse button down and drag it, and drop it into my macro toolbar, and that looks great. But you might say to yourself, well, if I put this on my toolbar, let's go ahead and do that, and let's hit close. It's this huge textual icon. I don't want something like that. I want a pretty little icon. And so what we can do is go back to Tools, Customize, Commands, select Macros, and find our particular command as well, our macro. And I'm going to right-click it, I mean, actually, you're going to need to right-click it on the toolbar while you're in Customize dialog. It's kind of confusing because if you were to do this without the Customize dialog available, you will not see this menu. So I'm going to right-click this instance right here, wherever I put this. That's what I need to right-click on right now. Right-click that and select the style that I want to use. Well, first of all, I want to create a button image. And so I can hit Edit and create my own button. So let's just go ahead and create a real cheesy little button here, drawing out the pixels and everything. And you can have a lot of fun with this if you're an artist type. I'm not, so I'm not having a whole lot of fun doing this right now. And there you go. We can even kind of scoot it around inside this area. Try to center it just a little bit. And hit OK. And notice that it now has an icon next to it. So let's go ahead and right-click this and select. I only want to see the icon by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and click Default Style, and there's our new icon. Now suppose I want to use a preset icon. They have plenty to choose from, so I don't have to go in and create my own. So I like this little coffee cup here. That's cool, because that's what I'll be doing while I'm being a technical lead. I'll be drinking some coffee and just kind of chilling out. So here we go. That looks great, and let's test our macro. Excellent. There's one other way to fire off your macro, and that is to go up to the Find menu, which also doubles as the Control menu, and use an arrow, and then type in macros. I can use my down arrow here to find my macro from all the, here. Let's go ahead and just type it out because we're having a hard time finding it. .work. There we go. Select it and hit OK, and it inserts it again. Alright, so suppose that I'm done with my work here on this project and I don't want to use this macro anymore. What I can do is select Unload Macro Project, and it will remove it from my available macros in the Macro Explorer. To load it again, I'll right-click and select Load Macro Project, and I can find all the different macro projects that I've created, and here it is available again. Also, from this dialog, you're able to launch the, right here, the macros IDE. And so what we'll do now is create a slightly more complicated version of a macro by typing it in. And this one we're going to put TL close. And so I'm going to create a message box. I'm going to get a message box result. And this is why I typically don't type in examples. So message box, and we'll just type in the name of the active window and the caption. Type in the message box style, and we'll just select yes and no. And then for the caption, we'll put in close window, and that should do that. Then we'll evaluate the result of the message box, either it's yes or no. And so if RSLT equals message box yes, then DTE.ActiveWindow.close, and then it's going to ask if we want to save changes or prompt, and I'm going to put save changes yes. So let's go ahead and save this and close the IDE. I'm going to have this open, and what I'll do is just add a button here so that I put it into what's called a dirty state, a state where it needs to be saved. And I'm going to double click my TL close, and when I do, notice what happens. Close window, it gives me the name of the window, Form 1 VB in design mode. And if I select yes, notice that it saved that without prompting me, and it closed the window down. So in this scenario, really the star of the show is this DTE object. Let me go ahead and scroll over just a little bit. That didn't help. DTE. Notice that all the things that you're able to get to, the active window, the active solution, active document, all the command bars. It would probably behoove you to spend some time looking at the DTE object, or rather the namespace called env DTE, to look at all the different things that you can do with the Macro Explorer, with the Add-in Explorer and the Wizard, like we'll talk about in future videos. But again, the frustrating thing is that you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do. And that would be my biggest criticism right now of it. But it's a pretty great first start because we didn't have this available in previous versions of Visual Studio. So I hope you enjoyed macros. Hope you use them like I use them. And hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.